English translation 296th contact. Saturday, 10th of March, 2001. Oro Point, 18 hours.
Welcome, my friend. You are here faster than I thought. I did not want to rush you here, which is why I told Florina that you should just come here when you were in the area.
Thank you for your welcome. Greetings also, dear friend. My coming is not of the nature that you assume, because in fact I am here because of other things that have nothing to do with you. But since you asked me to come here, here I am. You have something important to discuss with me?
As you take it, because officially there is not much that is important, but otherwise there is. By that I mean issues that we can only discuss unofficially. This also includes some things and questions regarding the work I have to do for you.
You mean the work that our spiritual leadership has asked you to do?
Correct. Besides, I have some other things.
I understand.
Well then, I would like to send you my best greetings from all group members.
Many thanks to everyone.
Short and sweet. Good. Then I would like to ask you what your linguists have said about the term Friede or Frieden. Which is now correct?
Frieden.
You are short-spoken today.
The clarifications have shown that the term Friede is wrong and should in fact be called Frieden. This is what our linguists say.
That is probably enough, because a scientific treatise on the term would probably lead too far.
It would probably not be useful either. Are you writing a new book?
Why do you think so?
These sheets here, the written text is coded.
But you see everything and you are not curious?
The pages are lying open in front of me, and one look was enough to recognize the coding. There were no more than 3 words that I read and from which I could recognize the mathematical code.
Of course, how stupid of me. I know you do not read any unsolicited documents.
I really do not do that, not only because I am not curious, but also because it is not appropriate. I read the 3 words only to see if they are coded and if you are writing a new work.
Excuse me, I did not mean to upset you. It was just a figure of speech of mine. Because of curiosity, I mean. Yes, you thought correctly. The writing is in code, and the whole thing is the first 27 pages of a new book whose title I call Human Beings of the Earth. I wish you. Feel free to look through and read it all if you like.
I will gladly do that, but only when I have gone again. So if you want to copy the sheets for me?
Of course, I will run them through the copier right away.
You can still do that later. If it is all right with you, let us first turn to those official things and questions that are not so many of, as you said at the beginning of our conversation. Then we can turn to the unofficial issues. So bring up your questions.
Then I would like to ask you how far your notes actually go with regard to our monthly meetings. I mean at our general meetings. What do you record there?
From the beginning to the end, everything that is spoken or which agenda you work through is recorded.
Does this mean that you also record any outbursts and the like?
Certainly. This also includes feeling-based and emotional impulses as well as unspoken thoughts.
Man, that might be quite unpleasant for some. You have done this before, but I thought it had turned in the meantime.
No, that is not the case, because all the records are of enormous importance to us. But why do you ask me about these matters?
This has its reason in that I want to know from you whether you personally have to deal with these records.
That is the case.
Then you can surely give information about whether we decided at a previous AGM how we should behave from the core group in relation to whether groups are formed by private individuals or passive group members for discussion and learning, and if core group members also participate on a completely private basis. Do you remember this?
The decisions and agenda items that are taken and discussed at your meetings are specially registered with us, so I can also remember the individual concerns. On the other hand, I can also retrieve everything from our registration block at any time if something is not present. But with regard to your question, I can say with certainty that at no general meeting have you ever taken any decisions or even had any agenda items relating to purely private groups for discussion and learning or meditation. Agenda items have repeatedly provided only material for conversations and discussion regarding organized study. Groups for which proposals have been made in such a manner that an official core group representation should be present at such a group.
What about the fact that Christian Freiner, for example, had to resign from a group?
He was officially commissioned by the core group meeting as the deputy of the core group. Previously, he was only an unofficial core group representative, which was not right.
And what about the situation when groups are formed on a purely private basis that deal with discussions and teaching, as well as meditation, etc.? Can core group members also participate on a purely private basis if they are not regarded as core group representatives and do not impersonate or act as such?
Of course, such groupings can be formed at any time and by any person, whereby, of course, core group members can also take part. If everything remains strictly private and the core group members adhere to not pretending to be core group representatives and not releasing any information that is solely related to the core group.
So do not talk about internal core group issues.
That is right.
So the core group only decides about a study group if it wants a core group member to be the official core group representative. What is purely private also remains private. Is that right?
That is the meaning of my words.
So the core group should not interfere in the concerns of such purely private groups, but only if a core group representation is desired by such a group. That only in repetition, that really everything is clear. What is private remains private, even for core group members if they want to join a private group. I think that the FIGU is a free community of interests and must therefore remain free of everything that is of a private nature. So it can never be the case that a core group member's purely private freedom is taken away or restricted in any kind and wise. Of course, this does not refer to the duties associated with a core group membership, because these are not private, but rather bound to an association. However, the private sector must not be neglected, which is why we also have our rules and regulations, as well as our determinations and statutes, which clarify how the duties and their fulfillment work. And it is not acceptable that we interfere in the purely private interests of the individual core group or passive group members, because these are neither association servants nor association slaves. In short, private remains private.
This should say everything necessary.
This should also put an end, as the erroneous ones claim that we bombard our members with a doctrine of salvation that restricts their freedom and misleads them, and directs them with dictatorial power.
Yes, I know these crazy speeches from know-it-alls, vindictive, envious, and misguided ones. And in this regard, I can only say that neither we nor you bring a doctrine of salvation of any form. Your teaching is the teaching of the hard life, from which the human being on the earth must laboriously work out his or her salvation through the perception of reality and truth as well as through cognition, cognizance, love, knowledge, experience, lived experience, peace, freedom, balance, joy, wisdom, and harmony. This means that the human being must work out and shape his or her life, their happiness, and all their progress themselves with great efforts. You bring through your teaching only the necessary information, guidelines and directions as they are also in our sense, but the earth humans themselves must take them up, achieve successes from them, and make them usable. However, this requires that they consciously create their own thoughts and seek and find the possibilities and the truth in order to then live according to them. All of us, and especially you, we are not bringers of salvation. Quite the contrary, because we show the hardness of effort and learning from which the earth human can work out their intended salvation on his or her own and only for themselves. We are only signposts. The steep and stony path to success and salvation must be walked by the searching and truthful human being himself or herself, and they must accept all efforts and hardships. But this can only be done by the person who recognizes himself or herself and grasps and fulfills the responsibility for himself or herself and their life.
Also with this, everything necessary is probably said. Then I would have a question that refers to the so-called Book of Jian from the Secret Doctrine. Svath already told me that there was nothing true about it, because Helena Petrovna Blavatsky had invented the existence of this supposedly highly secret book.
A pure invention. This alleged book never existed.
So it is. Then another question. I was once told by you that homosexuality is a gene-related matter. But our scientists now claim that this is not the case, because there is no question of it being genetic, and in reality, one does not know what causes homosexuality.
Your scientists are mistaken because there really is a genetic condition, as you say. This, however, runs in somewhat different tracks than the earthly scientists have worked up to now. They believe, as usual, that they have discovered and deciphered the last secrets, but this does not correspond to reality. Of course, homosexuality is also influenced by a number of other factors, but genetic factors still exist.
Then I continue. Years ago we talked about the alleged moon landing by the Americans in 1969, and about the background of the Pearl Harbor debacle. But I was told that these statements of yours could not be published until 150 years had passed. But now, at least with regard to the bogus moon landing, there is a lot of conversation going on around the world. Should we not now also publish what you have declared, namely in the following contact report books?
The way things look today, there is nothing left to object to it.
Thank you. How do you actually keep it among your folks? Do they also mix to such an extent as is the case here on the Earth?
We have already given you information about this before. No, with us, all peoples adhere to the rule that they remain among themselves and do not mix with other peoples. Consequently, there is also no overpopulation of foreigners with us, which could lead to the mixing of folks. Even though all folks and races work together here, everything that belongs to the individual folks and races is preserved. Mixtures between members of different folks and races appear only extremely rarely.
With us, it is unfortunately the case that the mixing of peoples and races is promoted by false humanists. But also the exploitation of the citizen is promoted, because the foreign overpopulation costs a lot of tax money as well as donation money. And if you say something against it, then you are called a racist and, if possible, quoted in court, because the Swiss people have adopted the anti-racism law, which means that you can no longer tell the truth about the overpopulation of foreigners, etc., as is the case with swindlers, liars, deceivers, and other criminals, etc., who in Switzerland can no longer be called what they really are. This makes it impossible for you to warn honest fellow human beings about such elements. Even neo-Nazis and other extreme criminal, anarchistic, and terrorist rabble profit from it.
Unfortunately, you say a true word, which both many citizens of your home country and politicians should think about, to change everything for the better, and to create new and really useful laws and guidelines that give the citizen the right to his or her freedom of speech and opinion, which, unfortunately, is forbidden in Switzerland. As you say, not least because of the irrationality of the disinformed or false humanist people, who go to the polls to vote on something of which they have no idea and whose background and falsifying explanations they do not recognize.
Juicy mail. But all in my spirit. But now I want to talk to you about missionary work and what you think about it.
You know our statement about it. Carrying out knowledge, wisdom, love, peace, freedom, harmony, and the values of the spiritual teaching to the human beings does not mean that it should be used for missionary work. To spread the teaching of the Spirit does not mean missionary work. But not that it should not or may not be talked about with other humans, but it means to carry it on only to all those who want to ask and be informed about it. Not missionizing means that one should not go in missionary form to foreign countries or to the streets, etc., in order to preach and to seek and recruit believers. 66. This is what is meant when it is written or said that the teaching of the Spirit with all its connection should not be carried out on a missionary basis into the world and to the human beings.
Clear. Another thing. With regard to the distances to the stars, the astronomers had to make a huge revision. Now they have to do the same with regard to age determination. I was only laughed at when I said that the age regulations were not correct, and that incorrect data were calculated. Recently, there are also speculations about the fact that some things with the Earth could be, as I have always said, whereby I had the knowledge from you, however, which might be clear, that also in the Earth a similar process takes place as that on the Sun. I mean that some atomic processes take place inside the Earth, because otherwise the planet would have been completely cold long ago. I do not expect you to answer that. But here I still have our manual, if I can plow through it a bit with you.
I still have enough time.
Here, I think it is a bit nonsensical. We are working the whole thing through with the whole group.
After what I have noted briefly on these pages, it is really a bit absurd, as you say, when all group members are burdened with it. Except for a few points, the board alone should work through these things, because as a rule they are purely core group decisions that do not fall within our competence.
By the way, our group has grown by 1 member again.
I know that from your last General Assembly. Patrick.
Exactly. But it is actually called a general meeting or a group meeting. But let us leave that, because that is not important. But what do you think of Hans-Georg Lanzendorfer's book about Fahrrad Zimmermann and me? You must have looked through the copies I made for you by now?
Yes, I did. I think the work is very good, but I have told you that before.
Sorry, that slipped my mind. Could you say a word about true love?
True love is the most creational thing a person can possess when it fulfills in him or her the devotion of his or herself. But the most disappointing and foolish thing is when then human cultivates a false, mental emotional love, which is nothing more than a hunt for an imagined happiness.
Beautifully said. It could have been me.
It is also, dear friend. Here you see, here it is in these other notes that my father Svath left me. You wrote down the words I said in Clotten on Tuesday, the 3rd of February, 1953.
Let me see, actually. I forgot about that.
You have written so much that you really can no longer remember the individual things. That is quite natural.
But can you still say your own word about true love?
Certainly. True love is the summary of all harmonic values that the human being needs.
I find a good word. Very good, even. But tell me, a woman complained to me on the phone. Since you are also a doctor, you can give me information about why women and girls have been getting bigger and heavier with their breasts for years? Somehow there is a development going on that is quite unpleasant for the female sex. The woman on the phone was not the only one who complained to me that she and two of her adult daughters suffered from bosom growth. All of them say that the weight of their heavy breasts makes them suffer from strain and backache, as well as other difficulties. I was asked for advice, but I did not know what to answer, so I could only guess that the evil was probably due to the fact that today's foods, especially meat, were pregnant with growth hormones.
That is absolutely correct. But it is not only meat that has the growth hormones, but also many other foods. And although it is hard to believe, there are also substances in fruits and vegetables that also have a growth-promoting effect.
I explained that the growth of the breasts, and also of the whole body, etc., can only be stopped, in my opinion, if hormone-impregnated foods are no longer consumed. But it is impossible to do that in today's industrialized world, where virtually all food is preserved with chemicals and hormones and so on, and is driven to growth.
With this, you have given an answer that corresponds to correctness.
Thank you. So then I did not explain any nonsense. I said that I was just making assumptions and that I was not sure, but I wanted to know. Then there is something else. The cult guru Rael, alias Claude Vorillon, and his followers, as well as several others, such as unscrupulous doctors in Italy and in some other countries, already want to create human clones. In my opinion, however, the time has not yet come to do such a thing because everything is still far too unexplored and unclear. Moreover, it is not the case that a cloned person has the personality of the person from whom the cells are taken for cloning. So it is lies and deception, and even more if it is claimed by the cloning creators that a certain child or another certain human being can be recreated by cloning. In any case, it is a completely different person with an absolutely new personality, and thus with a completely different possibility of development, different thoughts and feelings, different views and interests, as well as with an absolutely different character, and so on. Through cloning only a form of life arises, in this case a human being, which looks only externally the same as the human being from whom the cell or cells are taken for cloning. Cloning thus never creates the same person from whom the cell is taken. Therefore, I think that under the present circumstances it is not appropriate to create clones, also for the reason that people still have completely wrong ideas about it, especially with regard to the fact that a deceased human being, a child or an adult, can be brought back to life through cloning, etc., not to mention the shortcomings that still exist in the field of cloning. Behind all this there is only the desire for prestige and greed for profit, etc., where people are deceived who are incapable of procreation, or who have lost a child or an adult and are left in the belief or are fraudulently informed that the deceased could be recreated. I think this is criminal.
Which you are right about. The research of Earth humans concerning the creation of clones is still in its infancy. Besides, irresponsible people like doctors and sectarians, etc., lie and deceive, as you rightly said, are doing this, where greed for profit and prestige play a decisive role.
Nor should we forget the scientists who run along the same lines, although of course I do not speak of everyone, but only of those who act reprehensibly and trample on ethics.
Right. But now, dear friend, we should turn to the other concerns, because afterwards I still have to pursue an important task.
Do you want to turn the Sol system upside down?
You are joking. Of course not. I have a task that takes me to the Mekbuda area.
This is a bohemian village for me. Where is that?
It belongs to the constellation of Gemini.
And since when do you work there in our space-time structure? How far is it there anyway?
You are wrong. My area of responsibility lies in our own space-time structure, about 60 light-years beyond the Mekbuda region known on Earth, which is about 15 to 50 light-years away from the Earth.
Aha, interesting. Well, then let us turn to the other things. I will also equip the copier to make copies of my new book for you. I mean the already existing pages of it. So then, yes, I still have one question, or two, if you permit. I think it is important because we have been working on it for the last 2 months.
What is it about?
First, why you did not make me any predictions about the Chernobyl disaster, and whether you do not want to make any more predictions after all.
We have predicted the events around Chernobyl, but you no longer remember them. Our predictions fell on the time after 1984, when you were no longer able to write down the contact. Conversations because you were so ill in health that we did not know whether you would die or live because you were on the verge of death for years. And as for further predictions for the time to come, no, we will not give any more for the time being, because we have done enough in this respect in the past years and have had to realize that it is pointless to name things. Concerns and events of the future for the Earth humans, because they still do not reflect and do nothing to stop what is threatening. Predictions only make sense if they are taken note of and valuable things arise from them that evil can be prevented.
I understand. Then there is a question about rituals for weddings, births, and naming, and about saying goodbye when people die. What do you think?
That is different for federations, because there are allies with us who cultivate rituals according to their kind. But for our part, and this refers only to us Pleiaren, we have no rituals whatsoever. In the case of alliances, only a short word is spoken about the alliance to be entered into, as in the case of naming, in which a few words of welcome are also spoken about birth and appearance in life and as a new community member. If a person dies, then a farewell speech is given, which shows the deceased person in his deeds, thoughts and feelings, as well as in his works and in his character, virtues and personality, etc. This also includes merits, etc. In all cases, however, no rituals take place, which is also the case for honors and merits, etc., during one's lifetime. Everything in the aforementioned matters takes place in a straightforward and simple framework.
Aha, so no tam-tam. And what about busts and monuments, etc., in honor of humans who have achieved great things?
Such commemorative works are also created by us, but no ritual acts are performed around them.
So simply pure works of honor and memory. This includes, as with us, gravestones and memorials.
That corresponds to the circumstances.
Even with memorials, there are no rituals and acts of worship, I suppose?
That is also true, yes.
Here on the Earth, unfortunately, these things are handled differently. Pilgrimages, worship, cultural actions, etc. It is not about commemorative visits or simple memorial and testimonial visits to such places or monuments, etc. How is that with you in this relationship?
We also visit memorials and monuments, etc., but in any case this is done only for the sake of remembrance and honor, and as I said, no rituals and no ritual acts and the like are performed. But now, my friend, we must turn away from your questions, for my time is unfortunately limited today. If you have any more questions, you can contact Florina or me again when I am back from my duties in 3 days. I will be here for another month, during which time I will certainly visit you, although it can also be of a purely private nature. Then I will now say the following.